Good morning. I want to share this word that God gave me while I was in prayer this morning. And I want everybody to think about any dealings that they've had with a newborn baby. If you can imagine how fragile the neck is, the body, the legs, can you imagine a mother trying to put that newborn baby in a walker, expecting it to stand up with a strong torso, legs that can make that walker move? It would almost be insane. So God began allowing me to even think about that, or envision a child learning to crawl. The things that it sees on the level when it is crawling, sometimes that baby will see trash on the floor and they'll pick it up in an attempt to put that trash in their mouth. Well, God said to me this morning that it is time for us to grow up. We can all reflect on times that we as children of God have wanted things that have been promised to us, but we're not mature enough to receive them. I want to share this with you because God even began to speak to me about this word. And as I was in prayer, He allowed me to understand and see me. So I want to share a little bit about how God allowed me to see myself in this situation. So I want to read this scripture about the parable of the lost son. And it says, Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons, and it's found in Luke 15:11 through 31. Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. I want to stop right there for a minute. So I want, again, for you to think about all the things that God has promised us. If you think about people that inherit things, sometimes they don't even get their inheritance until they're 18, 21, or 25, because the person that leaves them this inheritance believes that they're not mature enough to handle what they've been left. So God allowed me to reflect on all of this while I was in prayer and look at myself, because for the last 2 days, not today, but the last 2 days, God had given me a different word, and I have attempted to sit down and share this word, and it was all written out nice and pretty, and I thought I had everything that I needed to say. But for some reason, I couldn't get it out. My tongue kept getting tied over the words that I wanted to say, and I was not satisfied with it, and I didn't share it. And while I was in prayer this morning, God said to me, Tangela, I've made you so many promises. Your purpose is ahead of you. But if you do not mature up in this thing, you will never see it. So God began to allow me to understand what He meant in that moment. There I had written everything down that God had spoken to me about this message. And God said to me, I put my word in you. You don't need the paper to say what I've already put inside of you. I want somebody to catch that, because yours might not be what God has given you as far as what to say to the people or to encourage somebody. But God has made us a promise of what our purpose is. And I'll give you another example. God called Samson. Samson was created with a purpose that he never walked into because he was not mature enough. He was too busy casting his eyes on lust, and he fell in love with the wrong woman, and he never fulfilled the purpose that God called him to walk into. Don't let that be you. It is time that we grow up. And I want to share a little bit more about Samson. So Samson, he never fulfilled it. You can go back and look at it. He fought battles, and yes, he killed Philistine, but he never led the Israelites into killing Philistine. He fought battles that were self-gratifying. He never fought a battle for the people of Israel. So he never fulfilled his purpose, and he died before fulfilling his purpose. So when it comes to the parable of this lost son, He was the youngest son. And I never even looked at it like this, but he wasn't mature enough. He wasn't even of age. He got something that his older brother had not even gotten, but he felt like he was ready for it. We have prayed to God and said, God, you promised me this. I can't see it. But just like that baby that crawls on the ground and it sees trash, until we can stand up and see something higher than the level of crawling, we're not mature enough to receive what God has spoken into us. We've got to be praying. We've got to be focusing and worshiping, spending time in God's presence to grow up. So even this morning, as I'm sharing this word with you, this is me being obedient to what God has spoken into my spirit when he told me to grow up and stop trying to depend on what I wrote down on a sheet of paper about what God has told me to say to the people when he's already put it inside of me. I am stepping out on faith in everything that God is calling me to. What we ought to be praying for, instead of asking God for our inheritance, we ought to be praying that we are mature enough, that God matures us so that we can receive and accept what he's called us to so that we don't squander it. My God, I totally get it this morning. I thank God for what he shared with me, because even what I thought I was supposed to share for the last 2 days was not what God wanted me to speak. God wanted me to speak out what he's put inside of me from my mouth, because he said if I open my mouth, he will speak. So even when it comes to us trying to understand, here it is, this son right here, it said he divided the property. His dad divided it. He went and lost. He spent everything. When there was a severe famine in the whole country, he began to be in need. What God gives us, he wants to sustain us by us being in his presence and understanding and being mature enough to understand that what he gives us, it will hold and carry us through a famine. But if we are not ready to hold what God has given us because we're crawling and trying to see trash and grasshoppers, but when I stand up, I don't see the level of what is on the ground because it is beneath me. God has given us power to tread on the heads of serpents. I don't have to worry about what is beneath me. Everything that Satan brings to us is beneath us. It is time for us to grow up so that we can walk in what God is calling us to. I need somebody to catch this because I'm truly excited with what God has spoken in me. So I just want to share this little word because even while I was meditating on it this morning, God shared this with me. I have often talked about Abraham in myself because I get it when he's headed up to sacrifice his son. Even this morning, God allowed me to understand when we mature, we can rest in knowing that no matter what we face, we are covered. And whatever water is thrown in our boat, we'll toss it out because we know that God is with us in that boat. We will not get discouraged no matter what happens. If the enemy attacks our finances, we will be mature enough not to sulk, whine, pout, and not move to what God is calling us to. We will keep going. So Abraham, he's headed up to make this sacrifice, which is his son. And his son says, Dad, where is the sacrifice? And this morning, for the first time, out of all the ways that God has shared this with me, his word is living. It is constantly moving. And you can read the same scripture every day, and he'll give you something different from that same scripture. Abraham says, God will provide himself a lamb. So this morning, God said to me, Abraham was mature enough to know that because I told you that this promise, your son, this is your son, this is your promise. He was content to head up knowing God is going to be the lamb in this thing. God is not going to let me sacrifice my son because he is coming to be the sacrifice. So God is going to provide himself a lamb. I need you to catch that because that is powerful to me. When you realize that God has promised you something, you will not be discouraged. So when the enemy comes at you after God has healed you in any situation, because I know God to be a healer myself. When God heals you from something and the devil brings another situation at you that contradicts any level of sickness, you can rest and be mature enough to not whine, pout, sulk, because you know if God did it before, he'll do it again. When the enemy comes at you with another situation that it seems that you won't be delivered, when God, you know him to be a deliverer, you can rest in knowing if he did it before, he will do it again. It is time for us to mature, to grow up and rest in God, knowing he has got us covered. God bless you. I pray somebody receives this word, that it encourages somebody. You just keep speaking to whatever your uncircumcised Philistine is, whatever mountain seems to be in front of you, because God has given us the authority to cause it to move. How does it move? Shift your vision. Focus on him, and that mountain will not be in your way. Be blessed, everybody.